this regularly scheduled board meeting of the Columbus Municipal School District on today, September the 8th. At this time, Mr. Glenn Lotzenheiser will offer us invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Tyler Latham and Ruby Marquez.
Okay, please bow your heads. Father, we are truly a blessed people, and for all of the blessings and mercy and grace that you bestow upon us, we thank you, Father. I just pray that you would help us to be what you would have us to be. Father, I pray for our nation, that you would just give us godly leaders. I pray for the young men and women in our military, that you would watch over them and protect them. And Father, I thank you for the school district, and I thank you for everyone who's working so hard on behalf of our young people. I just pray that we will have a very successful year. Give us the wisdom and discernment and understanding that we need to make the best decisions for our district and for our boys and girls. For we ask in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. So now we would like for Tyler and Ruby to come forward, please.
Everyone, please stand for the pledge. Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, if you would, please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tyler and Ruby. And they both are 5th grade students at Sale Elementary School. Let's give them a hand, please. At this time, we do have a quorum. All of our trustees are present tonight. We do have 2 parents who have signed up for open forum. First, we have Melinda Lowe, and her topic is a concerned parent regarding student performance.
Good evening, Madam President,
Good evening.
Other school board members, and Superintendent Hickman. My name is Melinda Lowe, and I am the parent of 2 students who attend schools here in the Columbus Municipal School District. I'm also a National Board Certified teacher with a Master's in Educational Leadership. For 16 years, I was an employee of CMSD, having worked as a 4th grade teacher at Cook, the reading liaison at Fairview, and for my last 6 years, I was the district's professional development and new teacher induction coordinator. I have always been a huge supporter of CMSD. I'm a true Falcon that even wears her purple and gold. I have been pleased with the education that my children have received because of hardworking, dedicated principals and teachers that always go above and beyond to provide not only my children, but all CMSD students an exceptional education. Oftentimes, I'm asked by family and friends as to why my children attend CMSD, especially now that it has been reported that all students are underperforming according to the results of a recent McGraw-Hill test. I have not yet received my children's test results, but this concerns me greatly since I know for a fact that they, among others, are indeed performing above grade level. It's no surprise that the test provided by McGraw-Hill showed our students performing poorly since they were vying for the opportunity to sell our district over $600,000 in new textbooks. I always tell naysayers that CMSD provides opportunities for my children that cannot be found in any other schools. For example, our Spirit and Destination Imagination program is exceptional. The gifted students have been taught to not only be creative thinkers, but critical thinkers that can apply what they have learned to real-world situations. The magnet school concept has allowed both my children to excel because they have been able to participate in amazing classes like visual art, performing art, dance, violin, PE, and foreign language. These classes have allowed my children to think creatively, and it worries me when I hear that our special area teachers are not going to be teaching what they have been trained to teach, but instead they are being pulled to teach math and reading. Our students and my children deserve better than that. According to Senate Bill 2369, all kindergarten through 8th grade students are to receive 150 minutes per week of physical activity-based instruction. Is that happening now? Will that happen in the future? One thing that deeply concerns me is that the teacher morale seems to be at an all-time low. It worries me that talented teachers are leaving in mass exodus to teach in other districts. It worries me that we are in our 6th week of school and teachers are just now being trained, and quickly, for that fact, on a new curriculum. They seem to be beyond frustrated. It is my opinion that they do not feel valued. They are concerned with whether or not they will have a job next year. They're being told to teach from a scripted curriculum and to not give homework. Are these teachers being given every single opportunity to do their best and be their best so that our children can be successful? Yes, I agree that what has been done in the past may not be working effectively. Yes, I agree that maybe it's time for a change. However, are these changes being done at the expense of our fabulous teachers and their students? Are we no longer implementing the magnet school concept? When will parents be given the opportunity to be a part of the decision-making process? Are teachers and administrators being given an opportunity to be a part of the decision-making process? We have to work together as a community of stakeholders to determine what is best for our students and move forward with supportive determination, because every single child in every single CMSD school deserves to be engaged, supported, and challenged in a healthy and safe environment. I thank you for your time, and I pray that each of you make decisions based on what is best for the students, teachers, and administrators of this fine Columbus Municipal School District.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lowe, for sharing with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up on the open forum is Ms. Lori Pierce.
Hi.
Hi.
Good evening, Madam President, School Board, and Dr. Hickman. First, I want to say that I support what Melinda says. I no longer have students in the elementary school, which is where most of the programs she is talking about are happening, but I do have great concerns for the programs and the students there. We had really good experiences in every school that my children attended, and I would hope that every student who comes through the Columbus Municipal School District still has that great, fabulous experience. My personal concern is over the implementation of these programs, the process that we are going through, such as the case may be, without input from parents, faculty, or staff. Now, I know every new administrator wants to put his or her stamp on a program, and Dr. Hickman certainly brings experience to suggest different ways that we could do things. But I'm concerned that there are great changes being dictated from the district without first asking the teachers and the school level administrators for their input. I've worked with the teachers and the administrators in this district for 11 years, and I know from firsthand experience in their classrooms that on the whole, we have dedicated and talented teachers and administrators who put the needs of children first and would do anything to improve the education of any child in the district of Columbus Municipal Schools. They and the parents have insight and experience into what has been tried and has worked and has not worked in our district. And it concerns me when the combined years of experience and training of those professionals and the parents are being ignored when a lockstep program is being put in place and directed from above. We do need change. We agree with that. But I have always said that the person that matters the most to me is my child, and the person that matters the most to my child is the teacher that's in the classroom with him or her. I want those teachers to feel supported and valued and respected for the professionals that they are, because they will then create the kind of learning environment that will do the most to help my child learn. When you interviewed in front of the public, Dr. Hickman, you indicated experience in bringing the community together to improve the schools. I would like to see more of that coming together. I don't see it happening right now, and it concerns me greatly. Parents and district personnel are frustrated, and many of our best teachers are already contemplating other employment. Losing that kind of talent takes years to develop, and it doesn't bode well for our district. You may have great ideas and even experience implementing them in other areas, and that's wonderful, and I'm happy that you bring that to the table. But don't skip the most important step, which is bringing everyone together on the same page. It takes a little bit longer, but it yields better results. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Pierce. At this time on the agenda, we're moving to adopt the agenda. Board, that will require an action.
Madam President, I have a recommendation to modify the agenda, please.
Yes, Mr. Spears?
Under item number 8, Board of Trustees, I'd like to enter E as in echo, as a topic had been discussed, discussion of Lee property and vocational training.
What was that, Mr. Spears?
Under item number 8, Board of Trustees, no, I'm sorry, 13, excuse me, 13. Board of Trustees should be an extra item, E as in echo, for discussion of Lee property and vocational training.
Are there any other changes to the agenda? If not, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Well, that was my motion.
Is there a
To approve
second?
with that amendment, yes.
Is there a second to Mr. Spears' motion? Second. It has been motioned by Mr. Spears, has been seconded by Mr. Lewis. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. It is unanimous. Next on the agenda is Board Attorney review of action items. Mr. Dunn, have you had an opportunity to review the agreements that are before us tonight?
Yes, ma'am, I have, and I approve the contracts and agreements that are before you tonight.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dunn. Next item on the agenda is the Office of Superintendent. September is National Attendance Awareness Month. Dr. Hickman.
Okay. And again, I had, trying to get the word out about the importance of attendance for our school district. And one of the things that we were able to come up with is that as a school district last year, we lost $873,000 in lost revenues due to chronic attendance or attendance period, kids not coming to school. And the beauty thing of it is that September is National Attendance Awareness Month, but we definitely want to celebrate it every month, every day, because it's clear what the research has shown is that poor attendance is a predictive of future job success. But even if you backtrack it, they're able to correlate that you can tell if a kid, you can predict if a kid is going to drop out of school by first and second grade, their attendance patterns. So that we call them now, they call them now elementary dropouts. And so it's important to build those healthy habits. And so one of the things that we're doing, we're collaborating with parents, we're collaborating with community members, we're collaborating with other civic organizations. We already have spoke in front of the mayor and the city council, and then we also have put together a program and incentives to work with our principals to really incentivize and celebrate those kids who are making the choices to come to school every day, and then also providing the supports necessary for those parents who are not able to, their kids are not attending on a regular basis. And one of the things, like I said, not only does it lead to a monetary value of taxpayers' money, because we do, through ADA, average daily attendance of a child, but it also leads to school failure, significant failure of children. So one of the things that we're asking, and we already, from some churches, I know Pastor James at United Christian has donated $250 dollars worth of gift cards, because we're asking for gift cards and those kind of things. We already talked to businesses, and we have businesses who are already willing to support us and give us gift cards and those kind of things that will go directly to our children to make sure that we highlight successful attendance. So the principals have the luxury to implement it how they want to implement it and how they want to incentivize it within their buildings. But as a district and as a community, we're really celebrating National Attendance Awareness Month. And like I said before, it's a large-scale problem. Not only can you predict those kids who are going to drop out, but you can also predict kids who in the future will have job-related performances to showing up to work on time, leaving work, showing the importance of going to work when they're supposed to. So the whole point of Attendance Awareness Month is really to look at your chronic attenders. And so what that means is 10 or more days So the research is clear that any child that misses 10 or more days of school, whether it's consecutive or whether it's spot different 10 days of school, that actually puts them behind, on average, a year behind their peers. So it's very serious that, you know, especially if we think about, if you divide $873,000 divided by 18, which you get to the individual days, which is like 40,000 or something like those amount of days where students miss school. You know, that's a serious problem that we're kind of having patterns that kids are getting into at an early age. And so we're just asking as a district that every kid attends on a daily basis, and that we have our nurses set up, we have our principals set up to really help support those individual families, because we're not pointing the fingers at families, because we also know that there are other situations. I know we were talking to one family who was homeless and going from hotel to hotel, but because they felt comfortable in communicating that, we were able to put support structures in place to be able to help support their child to attend school on a daily basis. So just want to bring that awareness to us, and know that as a district, and I know I have the board and community support, is that we're celebrating September's National Attendance Awareness Month.
All right, thank you, Dr. Hickman. The next item on the agenda board is the approval of the minutes. Item number A is consideration to approve the August 1st, 2014 special board meeting minutes. And item B, consideration to approve August 14th, 2014 regular board meeting minutes. Both of these will require a motion. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been motioned by Mr. Spears. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Lewis. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. It is unanimous. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. There are items listed A through F. At this time, if we could take all of these items at once, it would require a motion to approve. Is there a motion? It has been motioned by Mr. Lotzenheiser. Is there a second?
Second.
Has been seconded by Mr. Lewis. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your right hand. It is unanimous. The next item on the agenda is Office of Personnel, consideration to approve staff personnel items. If there is no report for that tonight, we would ask Ms. Tippett if you would pull that up, please. And board, we have had the information, and we've had an opportunity to review it. In order to approve the Office of Personnel, the agenda item number A, will require a motion. Is there a motion?
So move.
It has been motioned by Mr. Lewis. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Spears. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. It is unanimous. The next item on the agenda is Office of Deputy Superintendent. The first item would be consideration to approve staff personnel items, and the second item, number B, is consideration to approve RTP request for additional extension on lease of Union School. And Dr. Hickman will recuse himself. Mr. Shannon.
Would like the record to reflect that Dr. Hickman did recuse himself for item A. Also, we did consult with Mr. Dunn. All of the steps that were to be followed concerning this process for recommendation, they have been followed.
Madam President,
I would also like to note that he not only recused himself, but he left the room completely.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dunn. Mr. Spears?
Madam President, I make a motion that we not approve consideration to approve staff item A.
All right, thank you, Mr. Spears. Is there a second? It has been motioned by Mr. Spears and second by Mr. Lotzenheiser. Is there any discussion?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Spears?
One thing that sticks out to me is that while I understand that we have gone through to follow the letter of the law to allow this procedure to happen. As I've explained before, I think it's a shortcoming of the board to put another staff personnel in the position Mr. Shannon has been put into based off of him having to make this recommendation to the board. It is my belief, and I certainly hope that we do not have a continuation of such recommendations having to be approved, but that we would reach outside of the scope of the district to hire an independent third party if certain cases such as this were to come before the board. While I understand that there are certain legal remedies that we can adhere to in order to make a finding and have recommendations brought to this board, I would just think that for the sake of other candidates that may be involved in those particular issues, that there would be more of a level playing field by reaching out to an independent third party to conduct that, as well as not putting other staff that may have their own evaluations or own hirings and contracts tied up with personnel that may have interest in certain recommendations being approved.
May I ask a question, please?
Mr. Latson-Heiser?
Mr. Dunn, this really is directed to you. A couple things. It's my understanding that the procedure that was followed by the district and Mr. Shannon is prescribed by law, and that every I was dotted and every T was crossed so far in this process. Is that correct?
It has been represented to me that it has, and I have no reason to doubt that Mr. Shannon has done exactly what I specified. And based on that, then what is statutory and also set forth in an Attorney General's opinion has been followed.
All right, let me ask you a second question, and I understand where Mr. Spears is coming from, but in the event that this were to occur in the future, do we as a Board of Trustees have the authority or the legal right to go outside of this district and engage or employ or contract with someone who is not associated in any way with our school district?
No, sir. There's the only way that this procedure could be followed in this situation is the one that has been followed. And I'm pretty sure, I haven't looked at it since last month, but I think the legislature said that this can only happen twice in any 1 year. In other words, if a principal, if you were bringing in a principal for a school and his wife or her wife, a husband would be, you could do it another time, but then that's it. It's limited to 2 per year.
Okay.
But no, there's no other way. You cannot hire a headhunter or a third party to fulfill this obligation.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Latson-Heiser, for your statement. Thank you, Mr. Spears, and thank you, Mr. Dunn, for your clarification. So there is a motion that's on the table, motion by Mr. Spears, second by Mr. Latson-Heiser. Discussion has been had. All in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your right hand. We have two, one for Mr. Spears and one for Mr. Latson-Heiser. Those who are in opposition, please signify by raising your right hand. Okay, so the motion does fail. In order to approve the consideration for this personnel item, it will require a motion. Is there a motion? It's been motioned by Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Mr. Lewis. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. All opposition, please signify by raising your right hand. Please let the record show that there are 3 in favor, Mrs. Fisher, Mrs. Verdell, Mr. Lewis, and 2 in opposition, Mr. Latson-Heiser and Mr. Spears. If you could bring the superintendent back, please. The next item on the agenda, Mr. Shannon, is the RTP request for a new lease at Union School. If you could please just kind of talk us through that at this time.
Yes, ma'am, Madam President, Dr. Hickman, rest of board members. We have received a request from RTP, which is a group that is currently leasing Union Academy, to extend that lease to September 30th, 2015. Their original lease did end on June 30th of this year. They did request, and it was approved by the board, to allow them to stay until the end of this month, September 30th, 2014. They have since asked if they could come and just remain until the end of next year, September 30th of next year, to coincide with their fiscal year ending at that time. So we do bring that request to the board.
Okay. So, and I do have some questions for Mr. Dunn, but I guess we can take those issues up right now before we act. Does anybody have any opposition to that? Okay.
No, I just have a question when it's
Okay.
appropriate.
So, Mr. Dunn, for this contract, and we do know that the contract is in, well, we don't have we won't have a contract after the end of September the 30th, so we know that we renewed the agreement. And I think that we've all had some concerns about the condition that Union School is in. And my question would be, if we agreed to enter into an agreement, what can the district do to insulate ourselves from any liability in terms of any really high-ticket dollar items that would need to be repaired?
Okay, well, first of all, if you modify the lease agreement such as to build in something like shifting maintenance of a certain item to the tenant, that will be really a new lease, and we're going to have to submit that lease to the Secretary of State. But there are numerous things. For instance, I've heard that the roof is the biggest concern. I don't know if that's true, but I've just heard that the roof leaks. If you wanted to shift the maintenance burden to the tenant, you could do that and say all maintenance for the roof will be the tenant's.
And of course, if that is the desire of the board, if we did that, then they could always come back, RTP, to say, we don't agree to that. We don't agree to those terms or those conditions, and therefore, we don't want to enter into a new agreement.
Right, yes, ma'am, and I would suggest that it should, if the board takes action tonight, the way it would need to be framed, someone would make a motion to approve a new lease with RTP for 1 year with the modification that the tenant will be responsible for the maintenance of whatever it is, subject to the approval of the Secretary of State. So it's got to go, I guess, first to RTP, and if they say no way, then we don't worry about it. But if they say okay, then it's still going to be subject to the Secretary of State.
Thank you.
And I don't have any reason to believe the Secretary of State would have a problem with that, because it's the same lease. It was just a few years ago. Every 10 years you have to have a reappraisal, but the price was good, what was it, 4 years ago, 5 years ago? Then it's going to be good now, and I think they would approve it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Mr. Lotzenheiser.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Mr. Shannon some questions. I know that we had a discussion year and a half ago. We knew that this lease would be coming up. And I don't remember with specificity, but I know that there was some major items that would need to be addressed to bring the building up to standards. And I know there were some other issues, maybe minor issues. Could you share with the board the list of things that would need to be done to bring that building up to standards?
I do have some information, Mr. Lotzenheiser. And it reads as such. The insurance on the building annually is $5,100. That is the insurance cost. The maintenance expenses annually for the lawn care is $2,400. For the annual termite inspection, it's $150. For the fire extinguisher service and inspection, it's $60. And so if you add all of that up, that is what the expenses would be for the location. Now, if there are any repairs that need to be done for any leaks, there's a $500 cost approximately for repairing any leaks. And right now, there was a $150 charge for replacing or repairing one of the skylights. And what we take in monthly for the lease amount is $1,563. So on an annual basis, we collect about $19,116, and the expenses are right now less than $9,000. The monthly lease agreement amount is for $1,593. So on an annual basis, it's $19,116.
I was not asking so much about the ongoing expenses, but I'm talking about what type of repairs would need. We know about the roof. Could you tell us specifically what's wrong with the roof? Does it need a brand-new roof? Does it need extensive repairs? And anything besides the roof that would need to be done in order to bring that building up to standards is what I'm looking for.
And I have information here if Mr. Shannon doesn't have it available.
Mr. Shannon, or
Mr. Shannon?
do you have information? I think the only other price that I have is if we were to replace the roof in its entirety, it would be $330,000 is for the roof replacement. And that's,
Sure. So $330,000, and we make about $10,000 a year after expenses. And if the roof is 30 years old, if the last information disclosed to us, it's my understanding from what David just kind of circled back as to what Mr. Dunn was stating is that any modification to the lease would have to be approved by the Secretary of State's office because it is on 16th section land.
absolutely.
And, you know, as we have had repeated requests of, you know, upgrades and modifications and different things, would it, I mean, knowing that the building is getting, you know, to its useful age, would it be something to consider from the board to see if we could lease the property and sell the building if RTP were to want the property at its appraised value, instead of us having this $330,000 could happen expense any time during this next year lease or any time after that that we're going to be, you know, shackled with?
Right, so I guess we could probably do two things at once. We could look into what would be required to sell the building, which we know we can't sell the land itself.
Correct.
So we could be looking into that, but we could also extend the lease for 1 year so that we have a tenant in the building. The building does not downgrade because there's nobody in it, and still be able to cover the costs of the insurance and still to be able to provide the services such as the after-school programs that they provide.
Right. David, my question, excuse me, Mr. Dunn, would be, would we be able to, instead of extending it as requested for a year, could we make a finding to extend it for 60 days while we sort out some of these other options to consider as a board?
Sure. You've extended it once for maybe 90 days or whatever it was.
Right.
So there's nothing to keep you from extending the lease, and they'll have to accept that extension. But if they agree to it and accept it, then you could do that.
Well, then,
Now, as far as I think we talked about somebody, I can't remember who did it, but said about selling the building. You can do that. You just have to have it appraised, and it has to be sold for the appraised value. The lease, if they bought the building, they would want a long-term lease. And a long-term lease, the longest lease that a 16th section property lease can be in Mississippi is 40 years with a 25-year renewal. But every 10 years, there must be an appraisal or reappraisal, and the value has to be adjusted. The lease amount for the land has to be readjusted.
Madam President,
Ms. Lewis.
I heard someone say that there was once a 90-day extension, and I think earlier in the conversation there was a 6-month extension.
well,
I think the last agreement
last one was
was
from
due at the
June-
end of
June
June,
30th
and so
through
we extended
September
it
30th, 90
through
days.
the end of this month.
Okay.
to 90 days.
And I'm under the impression that when we extended it, we still knew that roof was needed repair.
We did.
Okay.
Is there any other discussion on the
So,
item?
Madam President, I'd make a motion that we approve an extension for 90 days under the same conditions as we find out what other options are available to the school district that could allow us flexibility with this particular property.
All right, thank you, Mr. Spears. Is there a second to Mr. Spears' motion? Is there a second to Mr. Spears' motion? If not, the motion dies for lack of a second. Is there a motion on item number B? Consideration to approve RTP request for additional extension on lease of Union School.
So moved.
It has been motioned by Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second?
What is her motion? Is it a 1 year?
Is it for 1 year?
Is that your motion?
Is it for 1 year? Is there a second?
I make a motion, we table this item,
There's a motion on the floor.
but the
There's-
motion to table supersedes.
Supersedes.
I will second that. Second.
It's been motioned by Mr. Spears to table the item, second by Mr.
Madam President.
Yes, Mr. Lewis,
Well, is it time for discussion?
you can.
Table it to when?
Table it to our next October meeting.
Next October?
Well, no. Excuse me, let me be clear. To our October 2014 meeting.
But if we do that, Mr. Dunn, from a legal standpoint, because this agreement is up at the end of September, how does that play out for us?
I think you're going to have to evict. I know you're not going to do that, but you're going to have to ask them to leave because you don't have a lease. And they're going to be a holdover tenant if they don't leave. So that's not a good position to
It's
be in legally. I don't like it legally to be in a situation where you're forced the tenant to
Well-
either have to leave or hold over.
Madam President,
Ms.
legally,
Spears?
it's not fair for the school district to have $300,000 of liability sitting out there just because either.
But I do think, Mr. Spears, the intent of the motion was such that we would write the language to say that any of those major repairs would be taken on by the tenant.
But-
And if at any time that the tenants decided that they did not want to take on that burden, then they could terminate the contract.
But that was not in the motion, and it's not part of the information here, and that would have to be approved by the SOS, and
Right.
that would have to be
So
approved
all of that language would have to be created,
by
and we
the
would
end
have
of
to
this
see
month.
that. We would have
So
to
we would
see
be in the
that.
same position.
Right. So your motion is that you want to
To
table
table.
it until October? That's your second, Mr. Lazenheiser? Okay, it has been motioned and second that we table
Well,
the
that's what
item.
I tried to do, but nobody wanted to do.
Yes, it does.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand. All opposed, please signify by raising your hand. Okay, so the motion does fail. At this time, if we're going to move on this item, Yes,
I'm
Mr.
sorry, I
Dunn.
was looking your way and I didn't see the vote. It was
the vote was Mr. Lazenheiser and Mr. Spears were in favor of tabling the item until the October meeting. Mr. Lewis, Mrs. Verdell, Mrs. Fisher was in opposition.
Okay.
Is there a motion for item number B?
Madam President,
We've already got a motion. I think there was a motion to
Yes,
table, but Ms.
Mr. Lewis
Fisher's
had-
got for 1 year, the same terms.
So it was motioned by Mrs. Fisher. Was there a second? Second by Mr. Lewis. Any discussion?
yes.
And I think I understood that the motion is exactly the same terms, but Mr. Spears had mentioned about the potential $300,000 liability for the roof. Is the motion, or if we approve this lease, are they going to be responsible for the maintenance of this in any way?
No.
Or are they going to be responsible for the roof? I'm not understanding that they're going to be responsible for the roof.
So I guess then, Mr. Dunn,
This is going to be, basically, you're going beyond what would be a typical extension So, 90 days, 30 days, 60 days, we're talking about a year, so we're going to have to submit it. It's going to be subject
Right.
to the approval of the Secretary of State.
Right.
But I think the motion, and Ms. Fisher can correct me, but I think it's the same lease, but for a one-year term from September the 30th, is that right? Is that the date?
From October 1st through September 30th.
1st, okay, October 1st.
Through September.
Okay, thank you.
2015. And Mrs. Fisher, you didn't state in your motion, and I know that there's language that would have to be created, Mr. Dunn, to be placed into the agreement, which the board would have to get, and we would have to review it to see if we are in agreement with the language in terms of any of the repairs that would have to be made. Is that correct?
Well, the motion that's before the board, I believe, is the same lease as what Ms. Fisher,
I am motioning that the same lease be extended to them, and the reason I'm doing that is because they've indicated in their request to extend the lease that their funding is for 1 year. And when you get into funding that has a time frame on it, they are more than likely unable to get that funding if it's less than for the year approved funding. So what I'm requesting is that they be extended the contract or contracted with 4 year through September of 2015.
Madam President,
Ms. Lewis?
Mr. Dunn made a statement that we're going beyond a normal extension, and the question I'm asking, does this still have to be approved?
I recommend that it go
does.
back to the Secretary of
16
State's
section
office
does.
because you're going beyond just a 90-day extension. You're a full term, a full year. I believe the Secretary of State has to look it over. I don't have any reason to believe that they would not approve it.
Does that need to be included in the motion?
Yes, sir. I believe the motion, I think I'm right, that Ms. Fisher has made the motion to extend, for a lease on the same terms and conditions as the current lease
Ending September 2015.
from October the 1st to September the 30th, 2015, subject to the Secretary of State's approval. And I'll call the Secretary of State tomorrow and try to fast track it.
Madam President,
Ms. Spears?
since we're in the discussion phase,
Yes.
to be crystal clear, that still does not solve the issue of the liability presented to this district, because this is being proposed to us as a continuation of what is.
Right, and I agree.
And so, I mean,
And I agree, and I was going to get clarification for your motion, because we've had the discussion about all of the maintenance and the major things that could go wrong with the building. And so I wanted to know if you would amend your motion so that we can include language in the agreement to that effect, if there are any major, beyond just a simple, a pipe that might burst, which we would be responsible for as the lessor. But any of the major repairs that
I would be
would,
willing to consider that. Let me just clarify what Mr. Don has said, just so that I am clear. Mr. Don said that the lease can be amended by the board to shift maintenance to the tenant. Is that correct? But that it would have to go, after approval by the board, that it would have to go to the Secretary of State for review and approval.
Well, first, I think RTP, before we went to the trouble of sending it to the Secretary of State.
Based on the tenant
Right.
accepting that.
Yes, ma'am. That's exactly right.
Then I would be willing to amend my motion that to shift the maintenance responsibilities on RTP, and based on their acceptance of same, to approve that and send it to the state, Secretary of State.
May I ask, just for the clarification, we're shifting all maintenance to the tenant?
Well,
That-
when you say maintenance, when I said maintenance, roof repair, that $300,000 that you're talking about is not maintenance, that's repair, is that correct?
That'd be replacement.
Replacement. And we're looking at the full roof being replaced at that cost? Is that
That's what I've heard.
what I'm
That
understanding?
sounds about right. But we were talking about roof repairs, and now we're talking about all maintenance.
Yard cutting and everything. I mean, that's $2,400, and, I mean, all that money, the $19,900 or so that you stated, Madam President, at that point would be in full coming to this district, and we wouldn't have that extra outgo paying for maintenance of another facility.
No, we still would have to pay for the insurance.
Yeah, you still have.
Well, no, I understand. Okay, excuse me.
So
I
we're
was
paying for
referring
insurance.
more to the maintenance side of it, which is going to be painting, it's going to be cutting the grass, it's going to be patching the roof or anything that's
And cutting the grass, I understand, was $2,400.
correct.
That's correct.
Okay.
So is that that's your motion?
That is my motion.
Okay, Mr. Dunn, do you somewhat,
May I restate that,
Yes.
please? Ms. Fisher has moved to enter into a one-year lease with RTP from October the 1st to September the 30th, 2015. Same terms as the previous lease, the one that's now has been extended, except that all maintenance will be shifted to the tenant, and that includes the yard maintenance, but all maintenance, including the yard. Yard's not normally thought of as maintenance of the building, but it's upkeep.
It's property maintenance.
Right.
Yeah. Now,
Does that sound right?
that sounds correct, but if we're going to get into, which we should, an itemized list of items that are included on the maintenance, maybe we should understand what all maintenance includes. We know that it's yard maintenance. We know that it's $150.
that's the annual termite inspection is $150.
Termite inspection.
I mean, maintenance would, you could go on forever and ever, because you've got
Yeah.
plumbing, you've got
Right.
electrical, you have mechanical, you have outside walls, you have inside walls. I think if your motion originally was all maintenance, which from a legal viewpoint is almost perfect, but we don't have to differentiate, we don't have to, just all maintenance is all maintenance.
Well, my motion was for maintenance to be shifted.
And that's
You're
I
adding.
like that.
Well,
Well,
but my motion was not for all maintenance. My motion was for maintenance to be shifted. Now, if the board is saying that it would prefer to sign a contract with all maintenance,
what's the difference, just for my sake?
well, you just said that all maintenance would be perfect because anything that had to be replaced, repaired at that site would be under the onus of RTP of the tenant.
I think that if you say maintenance that's going to be all maintenance. I'm just
Okay,
saying,
well, I'm just saying legalistically, I did not say all maintenance. If that's the way you're going to write
it's
it.
clearer that way so that nobody
Maintenance.
misunderstands. I think that's the intent.
I do too. So that's the intent, is that maintenance would be absorbed by RTP.
Maintenance would be absorbed by RTP. I just did not say all.
Got it. So we have Mrs. Fisher's motion is on the table with the second by Mr. Lewis. We've had our discussion.
I've got one more point.
Mr. Spears.
In consideration of this new lease, and I understand how it would need to flow from here to the next stations, would we run a analysis to see what current maintenance exists to make certain that as we go through this contract, that we get to the end of it, that all maintenance has been taken care of and there isn't anything that may have not necessarily been handled over the life of the contract?
I think
I mean, obviously,
probably,
you can see if the grass is getting high, but you
Right.
can't tell, okay, well, this may have not have been patched up, or this may have not have been executed because we were a month and a half out before. And I'm not necessarily directing that at them. It would be this way for any tenant, just to be clear about this. So that is my concern, is how do we know what we're still liable for between now and the end of the month and what we would expect to receive back at the end of next year.
Right, I think from a contract management standpoint, we should ask the deputy superintendent and maintenance to go out and evaluate the property at this time to see what the situation and the status is right now, and we would expect for the property to be in the same or better condition once the contract is done.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
We have already granted an extension with the same terms and conditions that existed under the contract that's ended. So are we saying that we did not honor the existing terms and conditions, that there's a possibility we did not do some things we were supposed to do?
That was not at all my analysis. It was
No,
just to make
I'm
certain-
asking that
No, I was
question.
just saying is that just out of a sense of prudence that we would make certain that there isn't anything that's left undone, that everything has been fulfilled on our end, and if the contract were to be approved, that we know a baseline as to where everything has originated from, so as we make our evaluation at the end of the contract, if it were to be approved, then we would be able to see, yes, everything was fulfilled, or before you can relinquish your, this back to us, you still have to do A, B, and C.
Right. Got it.
May I make a comment, please?
Mr. Dunn?
I'm pretty sure this lease says that they have received the property in its as-is condition.
All right.
And I think that's a great suggestion for Mr. Shannon to review the property and make sure. But every property of this age would have, deferred maintenance. I mean, things could have been done that haven't been done because it is an old building. So I don't think that we're obligated to repaint and refresh and redo a lot of things. Otherwise, we're going to be going backwards on this thing.
All right. But Mr. Spears, if Mr. Shannon goes out and they review the property, and as of October 1, if we enter into this agreement and we know what our baseline is in terms of the condition of the property.
I think that's just what we should know.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I've got one more question.
Mr.
Mr. Dunn, let me be sure I understand this. If we shift all maintenance to RTP, and there's a leak in the building, and they have to call a roofing contractor to come out to repair the leak.
I couldn't hear the last comment. If we shift all maintenance to RTP
To
and what?
RTP, and there's a leak in the building, they call a roofing contractor out to repair it. And the roofing contractor comes out and says, we just can't repair this thing anymore. It needs to be replaced. You can only repair things up to a point. But that would not in any way make them responsible for replacing that roof.
I don't believe so.
I didn't think so.
So
And
that is,
they can put buckets under it.
all right. All right. Is there any more discussion? All in favor of Mrs. Fisher's motion that we enter into the agreement with RTP with the changes that have been recommended in her motion, please signify by raising your right hand.
1, 2, 3.
All opposed, please signify by raising your right hand. Let the record show that Mrs. Fisher, Mrs. Verdell, and Mr. Lewis are in favor. Mr. Lotzenheiser and Mr. Spears are in opposition. Next on the agenda, we have Office of Grants and Special Services. There's going to be a report given by Mrs. Janet Adams on strategic partnerships. Mrs. Adams.
Thank you, Mrs. Verdell. Good evening, board members. Good evening, board.
Good evening.
This report will be brief. Since last spring, we talked about having a STEM focus in our grants and partnerships. And during the month of June, we were awarded 3 grants that Dr. Hickman asked me to just give you a quick brief on tonight. That information was provided to you prior to the meeting. We have a grant that was received. All of these were received in late June. I was off in the month of July, and you approved their acceptance in August. We have one from the Mississippi Department of Education for $10,000. This grant provided 15 new computers to the Lowndes County Juvenile Detention Center using the grades results content software. And this will allow students to continue to work during their up to 90 days that they're in the juvenile detention facility. One of the things that I just would like to note is that our juvenile detention facility services provide services to both the city and the county. So we do serve all of those students. The equipment is in and it has been installed, and we have just settled today getting the content information, so they should be up and running shortly. This is a great upgrade for them at this time, and it was much needed because they only had about half of the 15 prior computers that were there that were working. The center's open from 8 o'clock to 3:30, 5 days a week with a certified teacher. So this will be a great boost to those services. The second grant we're really happy about is $198,346 that is going to McKellar. And this grant's intended to provide a state-of-the-art robotics lab. And in our conversations last year with business and industry, employers, the job center, et cetera, everybody was waiting to see what the district was going to do to show that we are preparing our students to be able to not only pass the Work Keys exam, but to be able to be competitive in the workforce. The Wynn Job Center indicated they had 5 to 6 jobs a week that they could not fill, and most of our students could not pass those exams. So we hope that this state-of-the-art lab, which will be at McKellar, will be able to provide with robotics and engineering. We're going to provide engineering courses for those students. As we know, advanced manufacturing is the fastest growing job sector in the Golden Triangle area. And McKellar is going to offer Engineering 1 and Engineering 2, and the drafting instructor will be trained to take over those duties, and the drafting will be eliminated. Also, the state, the people that are going to be installing these labs also work for the state, and they are planning to provide the training for all of the new labs right here in McKellar, because they said we will have one of the best labs in the state. So we're really looking forward to that. And Mr. Bray is excited about his new opportunity. That grant started actually on July 1. We've ordered all of the items for that lab and hope to have it up and running no later than mid to late October. Hopefully before then, but it'll just depend because some of that material's specialized. And the third grant is $900,000 for a 21st Century Community Learning Center after school at the middle school. This will be the first, according to MDE, and only full-blown STEM academy, after-school STEM academy, utilizing the Project Lead the Way curriculum. We were able to go and visit Hewitt Trustville a week or so ago, and we did send 9 teachers to Mississippi State. You can't just teach this. They have to be certified and trained to teach the curriculum. The courses will be robotics and engineering and design and modeling. And we're happy to report we've got Mississippi State University's Bagley College of Engineering as our partner on this project. So we're super excited about that. So Monday and Tuesday we will teach the foundation courses, and quickly on Thursday we will do enrichment courses, which include character education, mock trial and debate, and Mississippi State University will be doing Project Sea-Perch, which teaches kids how to make and utilize a underwater robot. So we're hoping that this will provide a great pipeline, start us in the direction, and hopefully the children, once they leave this project, because it is 6th to 8th grade for 5 years, and hopefully it will provide a pipeline into Mr. Bray's robotics and engineering so it won't hit them cold. And we hope that next year we will be able to come back and write it for the elementary schools so that we create that K through 12 pipeline that will get our kids ready for the workforce and the demand here in Columbus. So right now we're getting all those things underway, and we're looking forward to implementing these 3 grants, and we are working on additional grants. In fact, MDE just came out Friday and offered a resource grant to help us buy more equipment for the Project Lead the Way curriculum, because we actually were a step ahead. So they see the need for it and the purpose for it, because STEM education is important across the nation, and a prepared workforce is essential to work in the Golden Triangle right at this point.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Adams. Are there any questions for Mrs. Adams?
I do. I have a couple of questions. I'm looking at the third grant for the after-school STEM Academy, the one that was for $900,000. And I see, and I didn't hear, I may have been distracted by reading something else. But I didn't hear you mention or elaborate on the character building components of that, as well as the community projects that the students will be obligated to participate in.
Yeah, I just mentioned the 3 courses by name. With the mock trial and debate, we're looking to enhance children's public speaking abilities, their research abilities. All of the topics that they will do in that class will be focused primarily either in STEM, medical, something that relates back to the Monday and Tuesday classes. As far as the character education is concerned, we have a nationally known curriculum through Farnsworth Bentley, who's a motivational speaker. Will be using his book to teach them not only character education, but manners, etiquette, professional image, how to project themselves, how to meet the public, and what they need to do. And as far as the United Way, they're working with us on the 4th Thursday of every month, and this is the part I'm most excited about. Our children will be going out in the community and doing a community service project during that 2-hour time period. They will probably be going in different directions because there's going to be about 100 kids, but we will be coordinating that with United Way and other nonprofit agencies. I know we helped with a project before with the previous Community Learning Center grant, but we want our kids to be able to touch their community in a holistic manner. They'll be groomed in terms of their academics, but they'll receive the additional support with the enrichment activities. There's no fluff. This is all circular. So we're hoping that it'll improve them not only as students, but also prepare them for the global economy. So that's where we are.
Are there any other questions or comments directed toward Mrs. Adams? If not, thank you, Mrs. Adams. I think the direction that we're taking in terms of STEM education is a big one, and it's an important one, and it's necessary.
One other thing, Mr. Lotzenheiser did talk with Mr. Thomas, and he agreed to give the board a pre-demonstration once the lab is fully installed, the board and the management team, to take us out there and give us a pre-demonstration and show how all of the equipment works, because a lot of it is specialized. Most of it I never heard of, but it sounded really good, and I think it's going to be great for the kids.
Thank you, Mrs. Adams. The next item on the agenda is Board of Trustees. The first item, Board, is the MS School Board Association 2015 Legislative Survey. We will be having our board retreat on this Saturday, and that is one of the items that we will have to take up at that time to figure out what our response will be to MSBA. So there's nothing really to discuss for item number A. For item number B, the Mississippi Department of Archives and History permit for work at Franklin Elementary School, it's my understanding that there was a request submitted a couple years ago, Mr. Spears, I think you said, and we were just getting back the findings.
I think that is correct, but also I believe there's been additional follow-up with other organizations such as the MUW as well as Franklin to work to remedy the issues that exist at the Magnolia Bowl, and it's also been brought to our attention as the Brownfield project has progressed that they completed phase 2 of the analysis of the Magnolia Bowl site, and so in extracting their core samples, they were able to determine that there was no contaminants there, no freon, no cars, no wood, nothing of any worrisome nature, so that would allow this board to really have a little bit more flexibility moving forward as to what we could engage to do with the property.
Okay. And so my understanding is we do have the permit. The permit now allows us to make some modifications of some of the structure there at the bowl.
That is my understanding in reading it, and if, you know, obviously there's a meeting that will be had soon to discuss in greater detail what the permit allows, as well as what other options can be brought to the board as a whole and the public to decide, you know, how things might progress.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Board, are there any questions or issues about that item? So we do know that there's going to be a meeting, and then after that time, we'll come back and bring information to the board to see what options we have in terms of developing the Magnolia Bowl. The next item on our agenda is an update on the Community Advisory Committee or committees. I think Mr. Lewis and Mr. Lotzenheiser were spearheading this, and I think that you all have a report that you'd like to share with us tonight.
There have been a series of conference calls. There's been a lot of documentation that has been reviewed. We talked to school districts in Newark, New Jersey, Broward County, Florida, Fort Worth, Texas, Austin, Texas, had conversations with MSBA, the Parents for Public School. And as a result of the conference calls, as a result of all the documentation that was reviewed, I came up with an 8-page document consisting of the bylaws of this District Advisory Council. And I was prepared to present it to you tonight, but before I was going to bring it to you, I asked Mr. Dunn just to take a look at it and to look at the legalities of the agreement. And Mr. Dunn has come back and said that in his opinion, and Mr. Dunn, I'll let you speak to this more in just a minute, but in his opinion, the committee that we are contemplating creating would be subject to the open meetings law requirements of the state of Mississippi. And for that reason, I mean, of course, the board can do whatever they want to. I have some personal reservations that we may be opening up a can of worms if we were to do this. But Mr. Dunn, why don't you, if you would, share the Attorney General opinions that you have located in regard to this proposed committee?
I did find an Attorney General's opinion that was in a situation very similar to the one that you are contemplating. And the Attorney General opined that both the Open Meetings Act and the Open Records Act would apply. And I know that it's difficult for this board to dot every I and cross every T, and to put that sort of burden on laywomen would just seem to be onerous, and so it may be counterproductive. From a legal viewpoint, I would not recommend that you go forward with that understanding.
Sorry, you would not recommend that we go forward with
having a DAC, because they're going to have to, if you did, I think you would have to assign to them a Jan Ballard, and you'd probably need to have legal counsel that could give them direction. And you've got another body now doing this. It could run your costs up exponentially.
I have a question. This recommendation, I believe, is in one of our policies. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But the policy states that we can have an advisory committee.
Yes.
So if that is permitted by the state, why don't we look to the state to give us the guidelines? Have we looked to the state, to the state of Mississippi? I know we've looked at Broward County and some of the others.
What we have done is that we have looked at school districts across the country who have first-rate, highly successful, ongoing programs of this nature, and it's been very successful, and it's really something that they extol in my conversations with them. And I think it would be very good for our district, I really do, but based on Mr. Dunn's advice and counsel, that we would be creating a lot of problems, and also maybe some money issues that would be involved. As much as I would like to see it, and as much as I believe in the concept, I want to defer to his judgment that it would be something that we should not do at this point.
Question. My question is, out of looking at all of, or comparing all of the other programs and models for other states, have we looked at what exists in the state of Mississippi and what has been approved by the state of Mississippi and what those requirements are?
Let me address that. One of the entities that I talked to was the Mississippi School Board Association, and I shared with them the basic concept of this and the organizational structure, and they said, we don't really have anything like this at this point in the state of Mississippi. So I think we would be plowing new ground if we were to do this. and they were not aware of any school district. I tried to find a school district in Mississippi that had something similar in nature to what we were talking about, but Dr. Waldrop said he wasn't aware of any school districts. So I don't think we have any other school district that we could compare ourselves with at this point.
But I think the original intent of the advisory committees were such that there would be ad hoc committees for, say, real estate, sale of physical property. And if we wanted to create an ad hoc committee of different realtors and developers to come in and sit and to advise us on that particular issue, then we could do that in an ad hoc setting, situation.
Yes, I think you're right that if they're coming into your meetings and they're giving you advice, then
Right.
open records and open meetings
Right.
laws apply, but it won't be another set of records to keep and all that.
So it was never the intent that we establish an independent body
No.
that would be really separate from this group. But certainly we were looking for people in community and stakeholders to be able to give us input on a particular issue. That was my understanding.
That was my understanding. And I think we've heard from specifically two parents tonight that they want the opportunity to have some input, that they have expertise and experience that they can lend to the school board, and that they want to be heard. And I think that it is not just the parents, but you've got all of the stakeholders, all of the components of the stakeholders in this school district that need to have an opportunity to give us their feedback and the advantage of their experience or their knowledge. And as far as it concerns open school laws, I think it's wonderful.
So Mr. Lotzenheiser, Mr. Lewis,
Open meeting laws.
would you be agreeable at our board retreat this Saturday, maybe talking with Dr. Waldrop at that time about performing this in an ad hoc setting as opposed to a separate
Of course,
entity?
that was not my understanding on the front end. I understood that you wanted us to come up with what we call a district advisory council, and what we did is we went all over the country and found the very best and used them as our model to a certain degree. Now, if we're going to do an ad hoc committee, I would need Mr. Dunn to weigh in on the legalities of this before I can create.
I think, what we're talking about is people from the community coming on a as-needed basis, not a standing committee. And I see no problem with that because you're already subject to the Open Records Act, the Open Meetings Act. The minutes will be kept, the postings will be done. There won't be any independent body, so I don't see any problem whatsoever with that.
Now, if people can come at any time to share their thoughts on any subject before this board, do we really need an agreement as such to reflect that?
I would just from what I'm hearing over here, I'm thinking that they may come, they may not come, but you decide when you think you need some help, and so you then contact some parents or maybe broadcast it that we'd like to have some suggestions. So that's the difference, I think.
Sure,
This is
yeah.
just,
So is that something maybe we could bring up on Saturday at our retreat?
Well, I'm not really sure to what degree, if we're going to allow or encourage people to come, I think that's fine. I think it's a great idea, but do we need to go and create some type of document, some type of bylaws, some types of rules and regulations, or just basically,
No.
receive people when they come?
I wouldn't think that we would need all of that, but I
Yeah.
do think if we understand that the concept would be, on an as-needed basis for issues that we need
That's
input.
fine.
Okay.
Madam President,
Ms. Lewis?
I'd just like to say that when Mr. Lossenhauser said about the advisory committee, that was my impression as well, that apparently we've been doing the wrong thing, but I was under the impression that we were supposed to put together a committee. So I think that on the 13th, maybe we can hash that out and find out a way how we can get more parents and people involved in our decision-making process.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Lewis, and thank you, Mr. Lotzenheiser and Mr. Lewis, for spearheading that, for going out and for doing the research and the legwork and bringing that information back to us on what some of the districts are doing across the nation. So we do appreciate your efforts.
Yes, Madam President. I do have a question. And I also wanted to know, since I've been here, are we also going to consider developing other committees? For instance, a financial committee, curriculum committee, all those other things to be able to have parents sit on the committee to help guide that process?
My understanding is that the Board of Trustees has at its disposal to be able to establish ad hoc committees, and then you as a superintendent for the school district can do the same.
Oh, okay.
Is that correct,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes, ma'am, and the Open Meetings and Open Records
Applies.
Act won't apply to you because you're the administration.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Your records, well, they apply. Your records are all open to the public.
Yes, sir.
But it's not like you have to post a notice when some administrators want to meet and ask some parents to come in or whatever.
Even if it's a standing meeting?
I don't think you would have to post a notice no matter what.
Okay, good.
It's a standing meeting. All right, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Ms. Lotzenheiser, Mr. Lewis. The next item is item number D, consideration to approve expenses for our board retreat on this Saturday. We were able to get Dr. Waldrop, who is the director for the Mississippi School Board Association, to come and to conduct our board retreat on this Saturday. The expenses that would be incurred for him doing so is his travel, the drive from Jackson to here, one night's lodging, which is, the price is $118.81. His mileage would be $184.83. The meals from Friday through Saturday would be $46. That is the per diem rate. And so the total would be $349.64. The additional cost that would be incurred by the board is Dr. Waldrop has been able to agree to design our retreat such that we all receive 3 credit hours of continuing education. So normally we have to travel and go someplace for that, but he's able to do that at this meeting on Saturday. So we would have to pay the regular rate for registration for the course of $105 per board member. And so that would allow us to get 3 hours of continuing education, which we have a requirement of doing at least 6 for the year. So that would get us halfway to what we have to do. So those would be the expenses that we would need to consider for Saturday's meeting. And this will require a motion for us to approve.
And I make a motion that we approve the expenses that you just enumerated.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lotzenheiser. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Spears. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. It is unanimous. The next item on the agenda is E, Mr. Spears, leave property discussion.
Yes, thank you, Madam President.
Welcome.
It's an item that has been discussed in the past, and I would like to bring it back up before the board to discuss more in detail. It is no secret that the education is moving toward more college-ready and career-ready. And I know that for too long that the city has had, and I'm just going to put it this way because I'm on the board, its own empire, and the county has had its own empire about how education is handled throughout the county. And I look at what is transpiring not very far across the river from here, and with the ongoing development of a communiversity that's in relationship, working relationship with EMCC, Mississippi State, and others. And I would ask that this board, since we have the Lee property site, and I know that there was talk not long ago during a bond issue for the county to build a new vocational training facility as part of their long-term plan, that you and I, as the real estate committee, ask that the board allow us to reach out with the superintendent as well, reach out to the county to see if we can't come together and have some entry-level baseline programs established that might help students throughout this county, city schools or county schools, have a facility that could come together as a baseline entry into the communiversity if that is a path that is chosen by students here in our district. But on top of that, that we obviously would set a precedent that we are committed to the mantra of career and college ready, because then we can see what assets through the state, as well as East Mississippi or Mississippi State or others that are working through the community that might be able to filter down into our programs a little bit more aggressively than might already be engaged.
So, Mr. Spears, are you asking that we speak with the county in terms of the county being able to take over the facility from the city, or that we speak with East Mississippi Community College?
Sure. Just to be clear with my steps is that I and the superintendent, with permission of the board, would engage the county board to see who they may want to designate to have a discussion of what plans could be developed at the Lee property site for an ongoing vocational training type facility that would benefit everyone in the county. And obviously, the community has Starkville and West Point, Clay County, others that subscribe to it. Maybe that we can get it to a point to where we have other school districts within the region that want to also utilize that facility that could help the school district. So our first step would be for us to engage the county school board and administrators to see what common ground is there, if any, to see if there would be a start to a entry-level community on the high school and junior high level platform.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Spears. So is that in the form of a motion?
So I make the motion that the board would allow us the opportunity to engage the county board and not supervisor, but the superintendent to get together and have a meeting to discuss some of those issues I just outlined.
Is there a second so we can get to the discussion?
I'll second that.
Okay, it has been motioned by Mr. Spears, it has been seconded by Mr. Lotzenheiser. Discussion.
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher.
I think that if we look at the community, that we are looking at entities that have already proven some level of expertise in doing this. And I think that it's an idea worth looking at. But I think that we should not confine ourselves to just having discussions with the county. I think we should have discussions with the people who are involved in communities as well, so that we can see what all of our options are and what is best for our students for the district. So I would like to have Mr. Spears, if possible, amend his motion to include not just the county, but the college and universities as well.
Sure, and I would have no objection to that at all. One thing, just to be clear, is that engaging the county would be the first step, because obviously we would want their partnership and alliance for the initial formation. But as far as engaging the link, engaging some of the other East Mississippi and the MUW or any other institutions that are part of what is coming together at the community, obviously I would think we would want to utilize their assets to its fullest to see how it is that we can truly create that synergy that they're trying to build there and replicate that within our school districts. So I would amend my motion with, to include the other entities such as, the link or Board of Supervisors or any other partners or alliances that may be part of the community corporations, that as we take step by step, that we obviously don't turn a blind eye to any of those organizations that may be able to help guide us down that path.
So is it your idea, Mr. Spears, that if an entity, as an entity, all of us can come together to do that, that our students who are currently in our vocational programs at McKellar would no longer be at McKellar, but they would transition over to this community?
Well, I would think that it wouldn't necessarily be something that you would just totally shut it down, because as we were just talking about the labs and different things, it may just be a site campus that they have certain, ways that they could go and take certain courses there. But then if there's something else that can be built that cannot be housed at McKellar or any other facility that's available, well, then this would just kind of give that ebb and flow benefit to having, because those campuses are not that far apart. If you think of where Lee's position and where McKellar is, it's not that far of a drive between the two campuses. And if my understanding is that the county was looking at somewhere off of Lindbergh, which is even closer to McKellar, is what I had heard. Now, I may not be off in my, information, but so I would think that that would be something that you wouldn't necessarily close it down as much as it is about, that's the whole point of talking and seeing how it could work and how structurally it could be put together. So that, obviously you don't have people feeling like, oh, well, you're shutting down one thing to do another. It's still that how you, as a community, are integrating everything to get to the end goal of giving the students the best they can get in certain platforms.
Question. Would it be wise to consider doing an assessment on Lee Middle School as it currently is right now? Because there certainly has been some degradation in the physical facility. There's been some theft of property. There's been some damage in terms of vandalism. So would it be wise first to see where we stand in terms of what that facility requires?
Well, not necessarily against what you're saying, but from the brownfield analysis, they came back and have been cleared. There's no hazardous materials. There's no buried wells. There's nothing, tanks, different things there. So that's obviously a step in the right direction. But as far as the facility, what could be used, I would think that would be something that would be discussed, because it may be, and I won't say as simple as raising the building, but I don't know. It's such an infancy now. I would just say that the first step would just be engaged to see if it's something that people would even want to work together on, and then at that point see what facility could be used, what would need to be knocked down, what would need to be developed or move forward. Because, as far as what is there, whether it's been, vandalized or whether it's still in good shape like it was before, I think in my mind it's not necessarily the obstacle that we're having to overcome right now as much as it is about finding out how we can bridge differences and, of course, entertain ideas to get to the facilities of what may or may not be able to be used there on the property.
So then, Mr. Spears, how would that be any different from if one of those entities were just to approach this board to say that they were interested in that facility? Could we not just...
I think that if one of those entities approached the board to lease it, then you would enter into a lease agreement with them. But I think what I'm hearing is some sort of interlocal agreement, which the legislature has passed laws that are built into all of public bodies. They want public bodies to work together. And this board has entered into interlocal agreements, but in the past, purchasing agreements, and then also for your alternative school. So I'm hearing maybe that there would be one or two or three entities that might enter into some sort of interlocal agreement and have multiple sources of funding and long-term commitments.
And so in my motion, as I'd stated earlier, is just for the board to give us the ability to reach out to those organizations, to also give Dr. Hickman the ability to reach out to the county superintendent and maybe arrange a meeting to see what information we can gather and then bring back to the board for consideration of what the next steps may be or where we stand and there's no more to continue to move forward with.
Sorry, would you restate Dr. Hickman we should authorize him to reach out to?
Authorize Ms. Friedel, myself, and Dr. Hickman to engage the county leadership on the board as well as, board members, whomever's designated, and other entities such as the LINC or EMCC, other entities that may help us understand the structure that we might need to put together for a baseline community within this county with our respective school districts. And I think that was seconded by Mr. Lotson.
Mr. Lotzenizer, if there's no more discussion, all in favor of the motion that Mr. Spears has made, please signify by raising your right hand. All opposed, please signify by raising your right hand. Please let the record show that Mr. Spears, Mr. Lewis, Ms. Friedel, Mr. Latzenheiser are in favor, and Mrs. Fisher is in opposition. Next on the agenda is the Office of Business Management, Tammy McGarn.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The first item is item A, consideration to uncommit $1.5 million of the Qualified School Construction Bond Fund balance and to approve transferring this $1.5 million to the District Maintenance Fund. Are there any questions?
Board, are there any questions?
Just for my clarification, the $1.5 million is just reversing the $1.5 million that was initially or was initiated in 2011.
That's correct.
And so the additional amount over that, will it follow this, or is it already booked for payments?
It will be used to pay down that debt.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I have a question. I know we've had some discussion about this in the past, and it was my understanding that when we did, if we reached the point of uncommitting this, that we would use that money to pay down other debt. Was that not?
A motion by the board was never made for that.
Okay, but didn't we have discussion along those lines?
We did.
Okay, so if this money is transferred back into district maintenance, what is the anticipated use of these funds?
I have not had a chance to discuss that with Dr. Hickman yet, so we have not made a recommendation for that yet.
All right, let me ask you this. Weren't you going to get with Jim Young and get his thoughts as to how we could restructure our debt, how we could pay on this? Whatever happened to that?
That is item B.
Item B.
Okay.
So for consideration of item A, that will require a motion.
So move.
Okay, it's been motioned by Mr. Spears. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lewis. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. It is unanimous. The next item on the agenda is item B, consideration to approve the engagement letter with the Muni Group.
And this is Mr. Young's group.
Okay.
Madam President, I motion that we approve the engagement letter with Muni Group LLC.
That's Mr. Spears' motion. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Mr. Latzenheiser. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. It is unanimous. Continue.
Okay. Item C is the monthly financial statement reports. We have the September 8th, 2014 fund balance report. We have a cash balance report and a budget status report. Are there any questions on these reports?
Board, are there any questions? The reports are for information only. Next.
Item D is the monthly combined and combining reports. Are there any questions on those reports?
Board, are there any questions? For information only. Next.
E is the monthly revenue budget report. Any questions?
No.
F is the monthly expenditure budget report. G is the summary of reconciled bank statements. H is the monthly ad valorem tax collection analysis report. And item I is the monthly approval to pay the claims docket or the bills.
Board, for item number I, this will require an action. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been motioned by Mr. Lewis. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Spears. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. It is unanimous.
Items J, K, and L are for information only. We have our monthly safety report, the monthly transportation revenue and expenses comparison report, and the monthly child nutrition revenue and expense comparison report.
Board, are there any questions on items J, K, and L? If not, thank you, Mrs. McGarn.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is Office of Compliance and Accountability. Mrs. Pamela Lenore.
Good evening, Madam President.
Good evening.
Members of the board. Just to give you a quick update on the policy review and revision process, I spoke to Dr. Hickman this afternoon regarding the process that we used last year for policy revision and review, and we will continue with the same process that we used last year. So Jan will be polling members of the committee later on this week to schedule our first meeting for the 2014-2015 school year. And just to kind of let you know where we left off for last school year, the committee will begin working to complete Section J. We're We have about 3/4 of that section remaining, so that will be our first task, is to complete Section J. In addition, we worked hard at the end of last school year to get the link for the MSBA online policies to be able to place that on our district website, and I do want to let you know that that is there. So that provides parents and the community and staff members with up-to-date and accurate policies. As soon as they are approved and it's notated in the system, then they receive and can review that information. So that's just a quick update, and I do want to thank Jan for working really hard to help with getting that link live on our website. So we do appreciate what she did to help us with that, and Beth for putting it there. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Lenore, and that committee looks forward to continuing to work with you and the rest of the staff for updating our policies. The next item on the agenda is information items. Dates to remember: September the 12th will be a football game between the Columbus Falcons and West Point at 7 p.m. September the 13th, our board will have our retreat from 8 until 12 p.m. here at Brandon Central Services. September the 19th is Columbus High School's homecoming against Louisville at 7 o'clock p.m. On September the 26th, the Columbus Falcons will play at Starkville at 7 p.m. On October the 3rd, the Falcons will play at Clinton at 7 p.m. And on October the 10th, the Falcons will play Northwest Rankin here at home at 7 o'clock p.m. Board, the next item on our agenda is for closed determination for executive session. It has been moved by Mr. Lotzenheiser. All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. It is unanimous. We'd ask at this time if the public would step outside, and we will come out and let you know exactly what we're going to take up in executive session. The motion was made by Mr. Lotzenheiser that we go into executive session. It was seconded by Mr. Lewis. There was no discussion. The vote was unanimous. It was 5-0 that we take up the item of approving or considering one set of executive session minutes from August the 11th. It was unanimous. The motion was made by Mr. Lotzenheiser, and it was seconded by Mr. Spears, and the vote was unanimous to approve those minutes. Now we come to the part of our agenda for such other matters that may come before the board. Board, are there any issues that need to be brought to our attention at this time?
Yes, I would like Dr. Hickman, if he would, to speak to the concerns of the two parents that appeared before us early in our meeting, especially regard to the magnet school programs and what our intention is with regard to those. But just speak in general terms to what the two ladies brought before us tonight.
Yes. Real quick, and just to touch on some of the things that the parents brought up, we are not eliminating we're not eliminating our specials. So we're not eliminating our specials. The other thing is that we are, and one of the things that I've told the principals is that all professional development dollars are to be funneled to strengthen the magnet, because I felt that in some buildings we were not true magnets. We were just magnets by name, and it's evident. And so one of the things that I really told them to focus on is strengthening their magnet themes. We also talked to the middle school, and this is, things that are coming down the pipeline after we roll out first the curriculum, is to look at, and I've been saying this since I got here, to look at how can that magnet theme travel to the middle school. Some of the suggestions that we talked about was whether we have an advisory period to where those kids who grew up through that same magnet can meet at that advisory and work on that magnet theme. So if it's technology, then they can kind of go over technology just to kind of keep that in the forefront of why their parents put them to that magnet to strengthen that. And then how could that articulation still happen in the high school? So one of the things that we talked about was, having a pathway. So when I talked about that I want the high school students to have a personal graduation plan, a PGP. Those are pathways. Those pathways will be developed in the middle school, be articulated in middle school, and then once they get to high school, before they become a freshman in high school, that they will have to meet with an administrator, their parent, and that child, and actually sign on a pathway that still symbolizes some of that magnet theme and those kind of different pathways that we will develop for our children. So not at all, I actually wanted to strengthen the magnets. As far as the teacher turnover, unfortunately, coming in here, we had, some buildings had over 50% teacher turnover last year, I'm sorry. And so one of the things that we just talked about with our principals is that we really need to focus on making our school district or our school buildings, the buildings that they're in charge of, the best place to work in the city of Columbus. And I hold true to that, some of the goals that we set for them was at 90% teacher retention. So my goal is 90%, or that's what the principals came up with when we discussed, that's why I wasn't late, but that's why I came in here right on time, is one of the goals that we talked about changing was the teacher retention. So investing in our staff. And I've always talked about building the capacity of our staff. And then the principals, we talked to them about leadership. And, sometimes it's how do you be an effective leader and lead your staff and not voice your frustrations in a sense, because it causes a disconnect with your staff. And so some of the things we talked about, how do we develop leadership academies for our principals, and how do we develop leadership academies for new leaders or aspiring leaders to strengthen the leadership capabilities within our building. And so whether a teacher wants to be an administrator or not, they're also teacher leaders within the building that helps lead through. So those are some of the things I think were, I don't know where the information was coming from, but those are the things that we have already been addressing and working on as a staff.
I would add about the magnet school themes, and I asked this question last year. I remember when we implemented that philosophy in the district 5-6 years ago, we said at the end of the 5-year period that first group of students would be assessed to determine exactly what did they ascertain from the magnet school concept, did they get anything from it, and we never had that assessment. And so I have a child who's now in 6th grade who attended the medical sciences school. And so I don't really have an idea of what he actually got from that concept. So when you say you're looking to strengthen it, I think that's fantastic. I do know that the report that we were given last year, it showed that it was right at about $1 million to have
Yes.
every year to conduct the magnet school themes. And so it's my hope that at some point that we will get some type of an assessment to show that our students really are benefiting from those efforts.
I definitely agree. And also the articulation as you see them go to the high schools, what kind of child are we producing? So for instance, one of the easiest magnets to identify, but if you really assess, so for instance, let's say Cook, it's easy to see kids in band and performing arts and those kind of things. It's easy to assume that theme is strong. But then when you start to look at kids as they articulate, and we're talking masses of kids, so we're talking over 70% of your population, how does that transfer for them? And so those are some of the things that I've challenged the principals. Not saying it hasn't, not saying it have, but for those who feel that it hasn't, then we need to come up with a plan to strengthen our magnets, put professional development towards that way, and strengthen those themes so that we can be true to our magnets. And also, how does that benefit us for the district, that it doesn't just happen at the elementary then go away? How does that articulation happen overall for all of our students?
Mr. Lotzenheiser, were there other points that you wanted, Dr. Hickman? Okay, board. Mr. Lewis?
Dr. Hickman, I noticed that you said that at one of our schools we had a 50% teacher turnover. Is there a way or a possibility that we could possibly look at exit interviews or something like that to find out what is what's really going on.
Yeah, and we talked about that also. You guys had charged me with that already, that we're going to look at exit interviews and all those kind of things through our human resource department. Once that's all developed, to make sure, Nancy, to make sure that that we understand and we can base it off of data and not just off a hunch. Because the same thing, when we set the goals with the principals today, one of the things that they want to make sure that they were not penalized for teachers that they coached out, because sometimes you want to help people leave that are not strong and not that they didn't necessarily get fired, or some people retire, or some people already are thinking if they, that they've been, some people have been applying to the county for years and haven't gotten in, and they're just waiting to get in the county. And so they have 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And we may want to help those individuals go to the county, because what we want are people here that are dedicated for our kids and our population of kids, and really have a heart for making sure that our kids are very successful within this school district, Columbus Municipal School District.
Thank you, Dr. Hickman. Are there other issues to come up under such other matters? If not, we are at the last item on our agenda, which is to adjourn the meeting. This does require a motion. Is there a motion? It has been motioned by Mr. Spears. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Lewis. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. It is unanimous. Meeting is adjourned.